Hi all students, I hope your preparations are going fine. Today we will talk about logical reasoning, we will talk about logic, we will talk about arguments. This is a basic primary class which will clear some of your base concepts, the fundamentals. And let me tell you, if you have all your concepts clear in your mind, you will be able to tackle any question which is thrown at you, be it CLAT exam or AILET or SLAT. So therefore, this video is basically a primer intro video. It is for the benefit of all those students who have joined our classes late. It is also going to benefit the students who have attended classes because it will firstly revise the concepts for them and as well give them a fresh outlook on how to approach things. So let me begin by saying that today we are going to study LR, and if we see LR, it is subdivided into two broad parts. One is CR and the other is AR. So CR is our critical reasoning and AR is analytical reasoning, which is further subdivided into verbal reasoning and non-verbal reasoning. What we are going to do today in this video, in this class, is primarily CR. And of course, we will see the topics of AR later on in subsequent classes. So now, let's begin by saying that what is the starting point for us. Let me introduce a term to you which is called logic and another term which is called argumentation. Since you all are aspiring lawyers, let me tell you, this is your bread and butter. It will help you, this video will help you not only prepare for your law entrance exams but also later on in life. So this video can be seen by students, lawyers and anybody interested in law alike. So it is covering all the aspects. Now logic is something through which we advocate a certain point of view and we take the help of certain things which we like to call as evidences, we like to call as assumptions. I will introduce these terms to you later on as we go along. So this is what logic does, presenting your point of view, and the entire basic, the fundamental to logic is argumentation. So if I say argumentation is fundamental to all logic, I will not be wrong. Now this whole thing which we call as argumentation or arguing, these are the backbone we have understood, and this is not the regular arguments which you talk about in real life. It's not the way you argue with your colleague, your friend, your siblings and discussing something. This is in relation to the logical reasoning subject of our exam, and therefore you need to you come across some types of questions which are related to argumentation. So therefore we need to understand this first. Questions like what is the inference of this argument, what are the assumptions, what are the strengthening points, whether this argument is weak or strong. So all these you would have seen in various places, at various places. So let's begin by understanding what is an argument. As I said, it differs from our real life example. So what is an argument? It is a sequence of sentences, statements, or you may like to call them phrases and clauses, which include a claim or a conclusion. So there will be statements, which are basically nothing but sentences because we are using the English language to write. So statements or sentences, and they will have something called a claim or a conclusion. So while we go along in this class, you are getting introduced to new words. So what is the first word we saw here? Argument, the statements, the conclusion. Okay. Now, this conclusion or claim is arrived at with the help of one or more of these statements. It can be one, it can be more than one. So, these statements in the language of logical reasoning are called premises or propositions. So, if you come across these three words, you should know that they mean the same thing. Now, in addition, the argument, remember we are talking about the argument. So, the argument also takes help of some hidden premises. The argument takes help of some hidden premises which are called, a new term coming up, assumptions. Okay. So now we have our first word here, we have our second word here, we have our third. Okay. So they are taking the help of these hidden premises which we call assumptions. And of course, once you have the premise and you have the assumption, it leads to conclusion, which we saw here. So let's call it our fourth word which we learned. And statements is a generic term. You basically should be focusing on premises, assumptions and conclusion. So let's take an example and understand this whole thing. Let me use my voice command. The ground was slippery. It must have been raining. So yeah. And okay. So this is a statement and it says in this example, what is it proposing? It is basically a statement or an argument, okay, and it is proposing a conclusion. So we have to understand that we need to firstly find out what is the conclusion over here. Very quickly and easily you can say that it must have been raining is the conclusion. And then if we say what is the premise, so the premise is the ground was slippery, or the evidence which proves this conclusion. So you see we have identified the premise and the conclusion, and the conclusion is obviously arrived at due to this premise which is the supporting evidence, and they are both connected. The conclusion and the premise are basically connected. Now what is missing out here? I told you this assumption. So there is some assumption which has been made here which is not stated in this, which is not explicitly stated here or not explicit in this sentence. So you need to understand about a thing about assumption, that they can be explicit, which means they will be stated in the argument or in the group of sentences, or they will be hidden, which means they are implicit. They could be implicit. So let's find out what is the assumption made here. Premise, you have seen the ground was slippery. Conclusion, it must have been raining or so. Let's go and the ground becomes slippery only when it rains. Okay. So what you see here, this is what is the hidden premise over here. This sentence is basically the hidden premise, which of course is called an assumption. So, can you now relate what was the premise, what was the conclusion, and what was not stated but it was hidden? Assumption. So, I hope that when you carefully break down this argument into its constituent parts, you will be able to arrive at, or you will be able to identify these elements of the argument. So, this is basically bringing to us the basic characteristic of argumentation. The basic characteristic of argumentation. And what is that? It is basically that any argument is based on an argument is usually made to make a point or to strengthen a point in an effort to convince someone about something, and the argument is made by using premises, assumptions, and finally leading on to the conclusion. So, this is what the entire characteristic is. Now, we have seen that in the previous example, the argument, the assumption was hidden. It was the missing link in the chain of logic. So, you may like to call assumption as the missing link in the chain of logic. I am sure that you would have understood so far. Now, let's take up another example in which there are not one or two premises but multiple premises. If Sudha eats rice, Ram also eats rice. Okay? If Sudha eats rice, Ram also eats rice. If Ram eats rice, Sham also, if Ram eats rice, Sham also eats rice. Sham also eats rice. Okay, so if Ram eats rice, Sham also eats rice. So we have two premises here. Let's see what it says further. If Sham eats rice, Manju also eats rice. So it is not catching my, if Sham eats rice, okay, and okay. The punctuation I am just correcting so that you guys understand it better. Anyhow, you can understand the same thing even without me correcting the sentences. Now, so we have three of them now. If Sham eats rice, Manju also eats rice. Now let's have the fourth one. If Manju eats rice, Madan also eats rice. So what you are seeing here is there are number of premises over here. So how many of them so far we have seen here? There are 4 of them. And lastly, it says, sorry, Sudha eats rice, so Madan also eats rice. Now, what you have seen over here is that this uh, argument contains so many premises. There are P1, P2, P3, P4 and P5. There's so many premises over here. And all these 5 sentences are providing you the premises. However, in the last one, the last premise also does provide a conclusion. Okay. So, there is no, what you can see over here is that there are premises building up and the last one is giving us the conclusion. How? Because it is using this line as so Madan also eats rice. So, this is a conclusion. This last sentence, last premise is providing to us. It is clear to us here that there is no missing link in the argument, or there are no hidden assumptions here. I am writing in short. You understand that when I write A, it means assumption. Okay. So, here we are seeing what we are trying to tell you. I am trying to tell you over here is the complete process of argumentation, how it takes place. This is not something which I am asking you to solve. We don't have to solve this. This is just an example to tell you that there could be multiple premises. So, what you saw sorry, over here, that there was a P1, there was a P2, there was a P3, there was a P4, there was a P5, and all of them were leading to, there were no hidden assumptions in that case, but I am just, for the clarity's sake that how this process takes place, I am telling you there would be assumptions in between, and they would be linked to the logic. Sorry, this space is little crammed up here. They will lead to logic, and this logic will lead to a conclusion. So, this is the entire process of argumentation. So, P leading on to A, which is sometimes stated, sometimes hidden. The logic is applied and the conclusion is reached. So, what we have seen over here is the complete process of argumentation, and this is what I intended for all of you to understand. And as I have already said, that once you understand these basics, premises, assumptions, conclusion, the process of logic which follows through, you will be able to solve problems which will come to you. Now, to gain mastery over this entire argumentation based reasoning, so all our questions are nothing but argumentation based reasoning. I am talking about the CR. So, in CR everything is argumentation based, and we need to identify, differentiate firstly between the premises. So, you need to differentiate between what? The premises and the conclusion. You need to identify what the assumptions made, and then you need to understand, sorry, understand the logic of the arguments made. So, this is the entire process you need to go through. Differentiate, identify, understand. Okay. So, I hope it is clear to you guys so far. We will touch upon another important aspect, which is identifying the conclusion. So, I will do this with the help of a typical passage which has 4 or 5 sentences or more maybe sometimes, and generally the conclusion you will see will be placed at the end. However, it may not be true in all cases. So, depending on what is the style of the author, the conclusion can be found in the end, in the very beginning of the passage, or sometimes in the middle also. So, let us understand this with the help of an example of a passage. A daily program of yoga is believed to increase the average life expectancy and reduce stress of a common individual, yet people who want to make yoga a part of their lives are hampered by lack of adequate information about yoga training centers. Therefore, Doordarshan should give a priority-based concessional advertisement for yoga training centers. So, I just typed this thing out, pardon any of the spelling mistakes here. You need to broadly understand what it means. So, if there are any spelling mistakes, punctuation mistakes, just ignore it, and if the sentence is not continuous, forget that thing also. We are trying to explain to you. So, this is a paragraph given to us. What you see here is how I am trying to show you how the same thing can be rewritten in different ways, and conclusion may not always appear in the end or in the beginning, sometimes maybe in the middle. So, in this format, conclusion definitely appears at the end. Doordarshan is Doordarshan should give a priority based concessional advertisement. So, this is our conclusion, which is obviously at the end of the paragraph, and the first 2 lines are providing to us the premise. So, the premises are mentioned in the first line and also in the second line, and they are basically making out a case that yoga should be, there has to be a publicity, there is a need of publicity of yoga training centers, and then they place the conclusion which is saying that Doordarshan should give a concessional priority based advertisement. So, this is a paragraph in which the conclusion appears at the end. Now, if I have to show you, okay, let us not erase this, I will type another paragraph over here. Doordarshan should give a priority based concessional advertisement for yoga training centers. A daily program of yoga is believed to increase the average life expectancy and reduce stress of a common individual, yet people who want to make yoga a part of their lives are hampered by lack of adequate information about yoga training centers. So, what do you see here? Thankfully, he has typed, Doordarshan spelling is right this time. So, now see, compare these 2 paragraphs. What was coming in the last line here has come here in the first. So, in the second format, conclusion is appearing first. This is our conclusion. And premises, obviously the supporting evidence or the supporting statements are coming up later. So this is an example where the premises are at the end and the conclusion is at the beginning. So therefore, you need to be alive to this fact that conclusion may or may not appear in the end always. So now a question which comes to our mind is, how do we actually differentiate between conclusion and a premise? Okay. How do we differentiate a conclusion from a premise? Okay. There has to be a question mark here. So how do we do that? Yeah. How do we differentiate? So this is the question, how do we differentiate a conclusion from a premise? So let's see that. It is mostly a matter in which a matter of practice, your experience, your skill. If you have read a lot of passages, your mind actually develops the ability to identify the conclusion without putting any conscious effort. But there has to be a method in madness, as I say. So let's see. To begin with, you can take one test, and that test is, let me write this so that you, what is the author trying to prove? Trying to prove here. What is the author trying to prove here? If you put this test, you will be able to arrive at the conclusion. You ask yourself this question, it will invariably point towards that portion of the paragraph which is the conclusion. So you can do this in your own time. Use this test with the paragraphs which I have shown you above. In the preceding examples, you can ask this question and you will come to know what the author wants. In this case, it was Doordarshan should give concessional advertising for yoga training center. So that is what was the author wanting to say. And other two sentences were just the facts in which he was supporting it. So there are a couple of words and phrases that are often used to signal a conclusion. If you find these words anywhere in the passage, you should know that a conclusion is looming around the corner. So what are these words? Therefore, thus, so, hence, consequently, as a result, it follows that, it can be inferred that, which shows that, which suggests that, which proves that, which means that. So, sorry, there are these are different words and phrases. So when you come across these, you should know that the author is concluding. It can be inferred that, which shows that, which suggests that, which proves that, which means that. So you see, when you come across these, you know that there is a conclusion coming up. So these are basically your signals. I told you a test question, I told you the signals which you should look for in any paragraph. And if you see them, you can be sure that that sentence is the conclusion. And even if these signal words are not found, you can ask yourself another question. Before which of these sentences can I put one of these signal words or phrases? So that is the question you should ask yourself, before which of these sentences can I put one of these signal words or phrases? And if you try this method on any of the example, you will be able to understand. So I am going to now give you a small example, and then we will close this class and move on to another topic in our class which will be held today evening. So let's give an example. It is immoral to take something that one has not earned. Gambling winnings are not earned. Gambling is immoral. State governments that operate lotteries are acting immorally. State governments that operate lotteries are acting immorally. Immorally. Okay. So there has to be a double L over here. Yeah. So we have these sentences with us. Now, if we try to identify the conclusion of this argument by the first method, that is, you ask yourself this question: what is the author trying to prove here? What answer will you get? The ultimate conclusion which you will get here, which has to be proved here, is the statement 4. The ultimate conclusion, and statement 3 is a premise of the conclusion. However, if we see, the statement 3 also is the conclusion of the sub-argument in which these two are the premises. So you are understanding how the logic is flowing. This is statement 1, this is statement 2. If we relate these two, we get the third one, and from the third one we get the fourth one. So obviously the conclusion is your last statement. The third statement, that is gambling is immoral, was a subset of conclusion of the first two premises, and the final conclusion was arrived from the third, which is gambling is immoral. Sorry, there should not be A over here. Let me, yeah. So gambling is immoral, and therefore state governments that operate lotteries are acting immorally. So I have just given you an example of identifying the conclusion, looking for a signal word, sometimes asking a question. So if you follow this method, you will be able to arrive at the premises and the conclusion. Now what we are left with here is understanding how to identify or identifying the assumptions. So which we will do in our next class, and also I will provide you with a video on this. So let's go back, scroll up and see what all we have learned. We started with LR, two divisions, CR and AR. We are focusing on CR right now. AR has got two, verbal and non-verbal. We saw logic, argumentation. Then we saw what is an argument, statements, claim or conclusion. Finally, we saw that statements, premises, propositions, these all mean the same. And there are hidden premises called assumptions. I gave you this example. Here you saw it was just one statement, so, and the assumption here was implicit. That is, it was hidden, it was not stated, and you saw this was the assumption. And from understanding the basic characteristics of argumentation, we understood by this example and how the entire process flows. So you have seen the flow of the process. So we had to differentiate between premises and conclusion, identify the assumptions, understand the logic of the arguments. And then we saw examples on identifying the conclusion. And we saw a trick here. We have to ask this question, we have to look for these signals, and even if we don't have, then we need to ask before which of these sentences can I put these signal words. And lastly, I showed you how there are related sentences and two premises. From the two flows the third one, from the third flows the fourth one. So that is all in this class. I will send this recording to you. Please watch it before you are going to attend my next class. I will also make a video on identifying the assumptions. Let me know if this method of teaching suits you, because all the people are not able to attend the classes at a given time. So for them, this will be a recorded kind of a lecture which they can watch it whenever they get free. So I hope this is going to be of some help to you. You would have understood some basics. We will build upon, we will augment our understanding further as we go along covering other topics. Thank you and all the best.